Okay, we'll get started in about 4 seconds. 3, 2.
Good morning, everyone. This is Attorney Nathaniel Lee. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining our show each week. And today we got some important topics to cover. And I'll be doing this solo today because I want to cover the Trump indictment. But before I get started, this year, we don't have any enthusiasm, but we have an important local election. We have the current mayor, Joe Hogsett, and his opponent is a well-financed multimillionaire Republican called Jefferson Shreve. And I was concerned about the advertisement that they're doing. And, it just gut wrenches to me to see such fraudulent advertisement. But we got some calls on the line today right away. Hey, caller, what do you think about this Jefferson Shreve running for mayor?
Well, first of all, Mr. Lee, I'm glad you're addressing the issue about what's going on with the indictment against former President Donald Trump. That's important, but more important to the citizens of Indianapolis and here in central Indiana is this mayoral election coming up between Mayor Hogsett and Jefferson Shreve. I wasn't familiar with that gentleman until within the last couple of months when things started happening here with who the candidates are going to be. And this guy comes out of the woodwork as a Republican candidate who seemed like he was a moderate type of guy. But as we look and listen more and more.
Taking my time. I said, shoot, I'm over in the low end. 2009.
Hello?
I put a thermostat on it the other day.
Hello?
Wait a second. Keep going. You're good. Okay, hold on a second.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry about that. Okay. Sir, you need to unmute. Hold on a second. No, not Imhotep. Hello? Okay, we lost our caller. Hold on 1 second. So in a nutshell, we have a series of advertisements that are in the air that the caller was talking about that are very important that you pay attention to. The problem that we have is that these commercials that you see are just fundamentally false. And I understand the caller's frustration. We lost him temporarily, but it has to do with the fact that when the gentleman Jefferson Shreve, before he started running for mayor, he was a right-wing conservative Republican. And one of the viewpoints that he espoused, he was a proud member of the NRA. Now, it's very important, National Rifle Association. And in that capacity, the NRA visited the state of Indiana and they had the convention here. But more importantly, before that, what attracted them to Indianapolis passed a gun law. Go ahead. So a caller, sorry about that. So Indianapolis passed this gun law that basically says that there is no registration requirement. And so now we have proliferation of guns and weapons in our community. And we have these shootings like on a regular basis. But the guns are not made in Indianapolis. We have these relaxed gun law done by the Republican legislature to give everybody a gun without a health background check, whatever. You can go to a gun show and be a mass murderer and buy guns now. It's just ludicrous. But go ahead, caller. Sorry about that. We had a technical issue.
Okay. Can you hear me, Mr. Lee?
Loud and clear. Yeah, loud and clear. So go ahead.
Okay. I'm sorry about that technical difficulty. But anyway, I was saying that I'm glad you're going to address the issue with former President Trump. However, again, we got this mayoral election coming up here in Indianapolis with Mayor Hogsett and the Republican candidate Jefferson Shreve, who, like I said, I was not aware of 3 months ago until he showed up. Now, he comes off as a moderate, but as we keep pulling the shade back, we see more and more that this gentleman is really going to change things if he gets into office. I mean, he says he's not, he says he's fair, and he's got, I guess, some of the candidates, or at least some of the people that are supporting him, seem to be of an opposite culture, our culture, so to speak. But I really don't know if we can trust what he's saying. Again, he voted to make sure that the NRA made sure that we had guns in the community, and that's what causes some of the problems we've got. And these commercials that he's putting out right now makes him look like he's going to be able to solve the crime problems we got in Indianapolis. Nothing's going to stop once he gets in. As a matter of fact, it might get worse. He's indicated that you're going to put more money into the police agencies here in the city and around the metropolitan area, but that's not going to change the laws. Jefferson Shreve is not exactly who I think he is, and hopefully he won't pull the wool over the eyes of most of the people that are going to vote.
Well, what about this, what about this? Before he ran for mayor, if you look at his corporation, no diversity. So he has a company and no diversity in his photograph in management or making a decision. Zero diversity. But now he's running commercial now with an African-American woman saying, I support Jefferson Shreve. He's going to bring down crime. It's just a cunning lie, because the crime has to do with the fact that, these are shootings and there's no limitation on the ability to acquire weapons. And so everybody confuses. We have an African-American police chief, the chain of command. We got a lot of diversity within the department. They're working hard every day, but they alone can't solve the problem because there's just too many guns. And the guns are because the Republican legislator, like people like Jefferson Shreve and the NRA, said anybody can have guns. So unless we get these guns out of our community, that's the starting point. And so if he's a champion of guns, so he's trying to solve a problem that he helped create. And that's what's so insulting about this. And then you have African-Americans come on TV saying, I'm going to support this guy. Well, he wouldn't consider hiring you until you decide to run for mayor. So, I just think this whole thing to me is unsettling, because it's just a fundamentally fraud commercials they're running.
Oh, I agree with you. And he's got the money to put that type of commercial out on the air. And if we're not careful and we don't get out and vote, we're going to get caught up in the mess. And all of a sudden things are going to change. And I do believe the Republican-backed, I guess the city county council, so we'll back him 100% since he used to be a former city county councilman. He's already a pretty impressive business guy. He's got plenty of money with his storage units that he's got around the city and in the region, so to speak. But this is their opportunity for the Republicans, basically, to get in and take that center seat of Marion County, because we're surrounded by Republican mayors all around the county as it is now. We just have to be careful. We have to get out there and vote. He's not going to stop the crime. If anything, it's going to get worse. We'll probably have more police action shootings that won't be investigated properly. That's just my opinion. I hope we become aware of it. And Jefferson Shreve is not the candidate I think you want to look at.
Well, thanks a million. And I hope that the audience recognized what is just fundamentally false campaign that he's running. It's so insulting. What they bought us this year, they bought the abrogation of women's rights. They're against affirmative action. So things that cause many of us to advance and be successful in our careers, they've taken away those safety net. The new Republican Party is not, I claim for today for the old Republican Party that believed in civil rights, and, the Lincoln Party that said slavery was wrong. Now we got these people saying that affirmative action is wrong, and they've ignored the fact that that we have this system that we operate on for all these years, where we were denied the rights and opportunity to progress in society because of Jim Crow laws. So now they've gotten rid of affirmative action with this conservative court. Now we have people that are well-financed running for mayor with this liberal agenda, who fundamentally is, they get in office, they're going to abrogate your rights. And also, we have checks and balances now with our system. We have accountability. We have a police action shooting. We just had one just the other day. They will be held accountable. If the police officer did something wrong, we have a great prosecutor. They will prosecute them. we didn't have that before. And so we have some safety nets now that we have now that we didn't have before. So just keep that in mind. So thank you very much, caller. And
hey, Mr. Lee, honestly, I hope that you continue to bring this type of issue forward on your show from now until we get to the election. Thanks, sir.
Thank you. We're going to talk about it each week. Okay, Imhotep, and we'll get a call to the radio in a second. You have a question for us today, sir?
Yes, how you doing, Brother Nate? How you doing there? And I just want to throw out there, we got a major decision yesterday from the Circuit Court of Appeals in Mississippi. Did you see that? About the banning the felons from voting in Mississippi?
Well, since, to be honest with you, every day there's been some decision somewhere in the country that, we're getting some bad decisions in various parts. And every now and then we get a blue light, something good. But I'm cringing on some of the things. The big issue that I was following this week was the Trump indictment, quite frankly. So it kind of sucked all the room because, we've never had in American history a former president get indicted, but then, and I was going to go through this later today, it was just historic in the sense that what occurred,
Yes.
But which
Exactly
Mississippi
right.
case?
And then that was the one about Mississippi disenfranchising former felons from voting, and the ACLU got it overturned, the Fifth Circuit, I think that it was, and they cited the Eighth Amendment, of course, for unreasonable punishment, stuff like that. But going to your Jefferson Shreve comments, and Miss Whitley Yates, who is following him around, I debated with her a number of times on her Twitter account in the past. She is intractable with this fake belief of diversity. Matter of fact, Deion Livingston, I kind of chastised him maybe last year because Deion said he went to one of those Republican diversity meetings and said that it was one of the most diverse things around. And I said, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? So he's like sucking some of this air, Radio 1 air, for them for some sort of reason. Deion likes to play both sides of the fence. I'm going to call him out too. And Pastor James Jackson, who had Jefferson Shreve on Black Expo weekend and was kissing up to him too. So we've got a lot of problems within our intra-ethnic issues going on to understand. When you tell me you see a man work his management team and he has no diversity there, that tells you about the focus of the company. Trump, when he was in office, 430 some assistants, not any of them were black. None. They had a big picture of them. None of them were black. So we get tired of hearing all this from Miss Whitley Yates and Pastor James Jackson and Deion Livingston about this diversity. When there's no diversity there, the Republican Party, think about it. Byron Donald and Senator from South Carolina spoke out against the Florida educational standards, and they got lambasted from their own colleagues. First time they ever said anything to benefit black people, and then they get jumped on and lambasted. Whitley Yates never says anything about police brutality. She never says anything about the disparaging treatment of banking when it comes to blacks. So it's a bunch of crock from Shreve and all of them with this diversity crap. They're full of it. And Trump and all of that is part of the same tree.
One thing I need to point out, we have the most racially diverse administration we ever had in the history of Indianapolis. We have a black police chief, we got deputy mayors, we have assistant chief, we have African Americans in leadership role in every government facility. Like 45% of the people who work for the city are African Americans. And so
they sure are.
I don't get that. And the second thing that's insulting to me is somehow these people espouse the fact that a person who's never been in law enforcement somehow magically cure crimes in the black community, who probably never visited a black community until he started running for mayor. It's insulting, quite frankly.
It's very insulting, and I'll leave you with this. It reminds you of when Pastor Charles Harrison and all of them brought Pence and Curtis Hill down to 30th and Martin Luther King for that photo off that time when Curtis Hill gave them that $500,000, which we still don't know what happened to, taxpayer money that went to 10 points for fake crime prevention. And they brought them down there. Pence And courtesy of, I know, as soon as the photo op was taken, they're ready to get the heck out of there. And if you talk to the people down in the area, because I've known many people down in that area, they have a very low opinion of Pastor Charles Harrison in that area. So I just want to throw that in there. Sharif is a hope. All the ones with him are a hope. And we appreciate you, brother. Thank you for taking my time.
Well, in general, I don't make comments on local folks, and the reason I don't do that because some of them are friends and things like that and neighbors. But I can say this to a certainty. I think that the fact that we have the candidate run for mayor and all of a sudden espousing diversity, well, care like charity begin at home. The best evidence of whether or not a person believes in diversity, look at his company. You look at the company, it has no diversity. So I don't get it as to why they think a person who's almost a billionaire going to change overnight and somehow be sympathetic to the Black community. First thing you'll do is probably get rid of all these African Americans in leadership roles at the city. And that's a nationwide trend now. I mean, we see the rollback of affirmative action and then we see the takeover of school boards and other agencies. And we're going in reverse now in terms of civil rights. But we have to draw a line in the sand and get out and vote because it's more than just the police department. We got other issues. We have women's rights. We have immigrants' rights. We have crime in our community that can't get solved by some outsider who caused the problem by advocating more gun usage or freedom to use gun. So, I think that this Second Amendment thing went way too far. Personally, the Second Amendment never said that you have assault rifles and all these things. So we have these legislators that have relaxed the ability to do background checks, mental health issues. And so now, everybody's got a gun now. Why? Because the government in Indiana say you can have a gun. You don't need to have a license. You don't need to do anything. Go to a gun show and buy a gun. And the whole thing is just insulting that for a politician to say, I'm going to solve the crime problem in Indianapolis when you don't have a clue as to you're the ones that contributed to it by having these crazy gun laws. But that's my comment for today. Now, I'm going to spend some time to go over this Donald Trump indictment. There's been a lot of talk about this, and I think that it's imperative that I cover some of it because in the history of America, we never had a situation where a former president has been indicted. Richard Nixon, got involved in criminal activity while in office, but he received a pardon. And so he wasn't indicted, but he resigned from office. In this case, Donald Trump was rendered articles of impeachment twice by the House of Representatives, but in the Senate, they never got the required 60 votes to remove him from office. I think there was 57 votes. So everybody say he was acquitted in the Senate, but that's not actually what happened. He was not adjudicated with the requisite 60 vote to be removed from office. So the Senate, I think, had 57 votes. They needed 3 more. They had 7 Republicans across the aisle to vote that he should be impeached and removed from office. And he didn't get the additional 3, so therefore he remained in office and finished his term. But before he did that, on January, after the election, there was a lot of rhetoric saying that the election was rigged. And so then there was over 60 lawsuits filed, which a person has the right to do. And they went 0 for 60. They lost every lawsuit because they came up with these esoteric theories as to what occurred. And you had these lawyers that was filing lawsuits that later determined they didn't have any merit. And a lot of those lawyers have been subject to misconduct charges. Some have lost their law license. So it's been a travesty in American history. So then this rhetoric led to what appeared to be an attempted coup or overthrow of the American democracy. And So we had individual in DC that attempted to overthrow the American system of government, a takeover of American system of government by not allowing these peaceful transition of power. Now, this was not a close election at all. The winner, Joe Biden, got 81.1 million votes. Trump got 74 million. So Trump lost popular vote by 7.1 million. He lost the electoral by a wide margin. You need 270, he had 305, I think. So it wasn't a close election. We had some close states. The voting was close in Georgia. As you know, he lost by, I think, less than 12,000 votes. And that may result in a fourth indictment for Donald Trump, because it was historic in the sense that Trump and his team called the Secretary of State in Georgia, and he asked the Secretary of State to find him 11,000 and some odd votes. And but the problem is the whole thing was recorded, and which was devastating. So we watch on the news every day, and I'm a political junkie. Other than trying cases, I watch the news, I read all the reports, and I stay attuned to political issues. And so in this case here, we were fixed on all these lawsuits, and it was also revealing that a lot of this information was recorded. So we did not have a situation where somebody disputed somebody. We know exactly what the president at the time, Trump, said to Rothenberger as the Georgia Secretary of State. He told him, you know, I need you to find those 11,000 some odd vote. And it was an open solicitation. And then he had a veiled threat in the conversation that if they didn't do it, they would be violating criminal code. It was just crazy stuff. Then we had Kanye West had someone go to try to get the people who worked at the election place to claim that it was fraudulent, and they recorded part of that. So it was just crazy stuff occurring. And I looked at American history, and I could not find anything in our history that was such a significant political attempt to overthrow the federal government. You know, so maybe there is, but I couldn't find it. And I was searching to see what was similar in American history. But we had 1,000 people invade the US House, the Capitol, and they took over that day. And when they took over, they were encouraged to do that by then the President of the United States. And since then, we've had, I don't know, over 1,000 folks arrested, and a lot have been pled guilty. They've had some trials. They've all been found guilty, and some are in jail even today. So this has been a sordid episode in American history, and it all caused by one man who failed to tell the American people, I lost the election fair and square. In fact, unfortunately, when I looked at the polls, they said that 30% of American citizens believe that Donald Trump did not lose the election, and the election was not fair and square, despite the fact that in every state, you had people running for office such as Congress, Senate, governor, all type of political races on the same ballot, and the fact that they failed to acknowledge the fact that how can you have a corrupt election when Republicans did remarkably well? And so now, before I get started, I'll take a few callers. real quickly. Mayhem, you have a question for us today. Hello? Yes, sir.
Hey, I got quick 2 points. I want to know who can we get in leadership to bring in the federal government to investigate your police department. In the last 2 or 3 years, we've had so many incidents of the police shooting people, and they're trying to justify it. The last so-called shooting in the news is not trying to look at the news. The news is not really covering it. I guess the police control the media. Shot the guy in the back, and they said he had a gun. But how can we believe them when we have no evidence of it? And then you got other people taking up for the police on his radio station. And a second point, this is my opinion. There's a great conspiracy going on in the inner city. The same thing repeating like the last mayor of Jim Mayer. This Shree guy is a copy of Jim Mayer. And what's bad about it, this Shree guy is an undercover Democrat. He's nothing like a Republican. What is going on? Why are they doing this to the inner city, bringing these propped up fake mayors running, and we know they're not going to win? And I want to ask you, a question. Is it illegal what your mayor is doing, trying to pass laws that he has no authority to do? He's trying to ban so-called guns out of the inner city. Why are we allowing this? Why are we accepting this? The voters here are so slow. Have a good one.
Well, you raise a number of issues. The point is that the city of Indianapolis is the largest city in the state of Indiana. We're about 18 and 19% of the state population here in the city. But the gun laws that are passed by Republican legislators adversely impact the city. So the city is trying to desperately show, hey, look, you're causing this increase in homicide. By the way, these gun laws across the country, it led to mass shooting as twice as amount of there ever been. So we've had this all over the country. We have problem with the use of guns. American is only 3% of the world population, but we're over 50% of private gun ownership. So we have shooting with guns because they're readily available. So if you could take some of these guns out of the community and do background checks to make sure people are mentally stable, make sure people don't have records, make sure they're not abusing their spouses. We have a lot of shooting domestic related where husband killed wife or vice versa. And so we have to first deal with the gun issue. The second issue had to do with the fact that anybody could run for mayor, I guess, and it's up to the voters to vote them out of office or vote, make sure they don't get into office. So it's a democracy. And so you can't do anything about that. And now why certain people in the community adhere to this, I can't answer that. But I look at the facts. The person that's running, if you look at his corporation, it has no diversity. So I don't know why they think that this person is somehow going to change overnight and be in favor of diversity when his political party is fighting us every day to get rid of diversity initiative. We used to be looking at diversity as a good thing, affirmative action as a good thing. Now, because of Republicans, they're saying that affirmative action is a bad thing. And you see it take over a lot of the school system throughout the states. They're getting rid of these diversities. So we need to work hard and make sure that we get out and vote, particularly in the local election this year. It's going to be the most important election we have in a while because we could have a fundamental change. Now, let's go to Pierre. You have a question or comment for us, sir? Hello?
Good morning, Nate. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear, sir.
I was going to, this past week, I saw something really disturbing I was driving down West 10th Street going home, and I saw that shooting of that young man laying in the street, shot in the back. And it was really disturbing, man. And violence in this city is getting out of control now. I understand the police can only do so much, but I think, we should back our police department. Now, when they do things wrong, I believe in them being charged and things like that. But, I wanted you to comment on the situation. I was hoping Milton would be on this week because I wanted you to comment on the NAACP out there in Oakland screaming at the mayor and folk on behalf of the black residents and the residents of Oakland. They don't have any police force out there that's doing anything to impact the crime. It's crazy out there. And I don't want to see that come to Indianapolis. And, you talk about these reformist prosecutors, which I believe in. I believe that people, if they're wrongly convicted, they should get a fair break, because I certainly wouldn't want to be sitting in prison on false charges or whatever. But, these soft prosecutors, like Ryan Mears, in my opinion, you can't be a soft prosecutor. You got to be a fair prosecutor. But being soft on some of these criminal cases, man, that's just not going to cut it.
Well, wait a 1 second. Let me correct something you said. I think that he's objective, and here's the situation. When he came into office, he saw that almost 30% of the American in jail, African American, had to do with low-level things such as marijuana possession and things like that, right? So those young African American in jail, and they looking at time, or they're not in their home, they're not working, and they become recidivists. And so he says, well, I'm not going to prosecute these low-level marijuana cases because they don't prosecute them up in Carmel, and it's like in Indianapolis. And so we were having an overabundance of young Black males in jail, and I thought that was a great thing. In other words, marijuana has been legalized in a lot of states. And I'm not in favor of smoking marijuana or anything like that. In fact, I'm against any type of drug use. But on the other hand, I don't think that it should be criminalized in our state, because it's not criminalized in about half the state now. You could buy marijuana. And so you say soft on crime, that's the first point. The second point, though, that's most important, now this is very important. Ryan Mears have prosecuted more police officers for misconduct than any prosecutor in the history of our county. So police officers were doing bad things, which, would come up all the time. It's an ongoing issue. They're out there to protect and serve, but they make mistakes, and they also commit crimes themselves. He's held them accountable. I think he's prosecuted over about 50 cops already, and that's a historic number.
No problem with that. No problem with that at all. But and we're not talking about marijuana offenses. We're talking about crack dealing, moving weight, that type of dangerous drug dealing that's causing all this violence on the street. And hey, even weed dealing, when you get in a fight over weed and all of that, that can cause crime too. But when I talk about Ryan Mears being soft on crime, I'm thinking about a friend acquaintance, Janessa Cooper, that was shot and killed, and no criminal charges or explanation or anything like that. And now she's forgotten. So, you got to be tough on these criminals, man. You have to. And thanks for taking my call.
And now let me explain to everyone how the criminal justice system works in our city and our country. Law enforcement officials, police officers, they work, they investigate, and they collect evidence of criminal conduct. And they turn that over to the prosecutor's office for filing charges. So if a charge is not filed on a criminal case, that tells me that the police department did not collect the evidence to prove a case. And one of the problems we have is that I was talking to a young lady the other day whose husband got murdered, and I looked it up about 1:38 in the morning, got shot and killed. And the people who were witness to the case, they disappeared. They would not cooperate. And so the charges against the individual who killed her husband could not be prosecuted because the eyewitnesses refused to cooperate and to testify against the person who did the murder. So there are limitations in terms of the criminal justice system. We are a country of laws, and the net result is the prosecutor, although maybe seeking justice, but they're hindered by the inability to collect evidence to prove a case. So the cases that they get evidence on, from what I've seen, they successfully prosecuted these folks. They have a very outstanding conviction rate, is upper 90-some% on these crimes, but nothing is perfect. The third thing, most important, the prosecutor's office now is short-staffed. They're down about 50 employees, and so they have some budgetary issues and some staffing issues like anything else, and they got a bunch of dedicated men and women who work every day, and I talked to some of them. They're working 12, 14 hours a day trying to keep up with this tide of violence. The tide of violence in our city, it manifests itself with the high amount of guns that are in the community. See, you can't police a shooting at 3:30 in the morning when somebody shoot a neighbor at 3:30 in the morning. There's nothing that law enforcement could do because they don't have a crystal ball that say two people going to be out at 3:30 in the morning arguing and one shoot the other. You can't. So you can't prevent that type of thing. But what you can do is prevent people from having possession of the guns who have mental condition, criminal history, or propensity for violence. So without the ability to control guns, folks, if you can't control gun and gun ownership, you cannot attack the problem of homicide. You have to start with why they're dying, well, they've been shot. So common sense tells you that you have to take the guns out of the hand of these folks that are committing these murders. And that's nothing that the local mayor could do or the prosecutor or the police chief could do. That's the Republican-controlled legislator who sold out to the NRA. And Jefferson Street is part of that group. They're proud members of the NRA, and they're advocating unlimited use of guns. And so if you want to start blaming somebody, you blame the legislation that created this mess by allowing anyone to own a gun. I think it's insulting. And then you say that you could solve the problem that you helped create. Now let me cover this Donald Trump issue. Like I said earlier, the former president was indicted for the third time, but the indictment, when I read it, it's a speaking indictment. And let me read to you what I mean. Here's what they said. The defendant, Donald Trump, had a right, like every American, to speak publicly about the election and even to claim falsely that there had been outcome determinative fraud during the election and that he had won the election. He was entitled to challenge the results of the election through lawful and legal means. Indeed, he did file lawsuits in many states. He pursued his efforts, but the effort to change the outcome in any state through recounts, audits, legal challenges were unsuccessful. And so what the indictment was saying, the indictment acknowledged that Donald Trump had a First Amendment right to lie about the election and to file lawsuit challenges the results. The lawyers, on the other hand, they're held to a different standard. They can't lie to the judges in the court, and therefore some of those lawyers have already been suspended or disbarred. But the speaking indictment seeks to draw a clear line between the items that are lawful and the items that are unlawful. So the idea of using unlawful means of discounting legitimate votes and subverting the election results, those are the focus of the criminal indictment. Now, it listed the co-conspirators, but here are the legal counts. The three areas of an indictment is in paragraph 4 of the indictment. Number 1, conspiracy to defraud the United States of America by using dishonesty, fraud, and deceit to impair, obstruct, and defeat the lawful federal government function by which the results of the presidential elections are collected, counted, and certified by the federal government in violation of the federal criminal code. The second, a conspiracy to corruptly obstruct and impede the January 6, 2021 congressional proceedings at which the collected results of the presidential elections are counted and certified. In other words, the certification proceedings of the president in violation of federal criminal statute. And the third and final allegation, a conspiracy against the right to vote and have one's vote counted in violation of federal criminal statute. And those are the charges. And if convicted, these charges carry a pretty substantial sentence if convicted. Now, like any American, the former president of the United States has the Fifth Amendment right to not incriminate himself. And he also has the presumption of innocence. So every criminal defendant goes into a courtroom with those rights, including the former president of the United States. Now, what did we see with our own eyes before we talk about the rest of the indictment? On TV for a whole month, starting January 6th of 2021, we saw an angry group of individuals who considered themselves patriots. They thought they were patriots because they believed in one man. Patriotism is not a one-way street. Patriotism has nothing to do with following the whims, the desires, and the false statement of one person. Patriotism means that you stand up for democracy, United States Constitution. And in our laws, it's repeatedly said that no person is above the law, that we are a democracy and we're not a communist regime where one person can determine the fate of American citizens. Indeed, our ancestors fought and died to preserve these freedoms that we hold. We have a constitution. We have a Bill of Rights. We have federal statutes. So our democracy, in my mind, in my opinion, is the greatest democracy in the whole world. But what we saw was not consistent with a democracy on January 6th. What we saw is something that was similar to what occurs in some third world country, not a well-educated society like the United States of America. And what was the most shocking episode to me about January 6th? There were lawyers, there were doctors, there were police officers, there were firemen and women, and there was a lot of really intelligent folks. And in my mind, I kept saying, it's simple math. If one guy loses by 7.1 million votes, that's some good evidence that they probably didn't get elected. And so I watched on TV the political pundits this week, and their big defense is that the government has to prove that Donald Trump knew that he lost the election. That's right. They said that's going to be very difficult to prove. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, isn't it simple math? He didn't get 270 electoral votes. The popular vote, he lost by 7.1 million. Isn't that a good indication that maybe that's pretty substantial evidence that you lost? And their defense of these charges, based on the political pundits, is based on the fact that he received advice from counsel. But in all honesty, what I seen was idiotic advice, and those lawyers are suffering some significant repercussion from giving this inaccurate advice. But he had lawyers at the White House counsel. He had the Attorney General, William Barr, who said, these are nutcase ideas. In other words, you lost the election fair and square. So the people who he appointed and hired to provide legal advice to him as president, he ignored it. He ignored competent legal counsel. Instead, he, I guess under his defense, he's going to throw these people under the bus in order to get out of this. His whole defense is that this is what my lawyer told me. And they're going to say, well, wait a second. You had White House counsel, you had the Attorney General of the United States, you had the FBI, you had the whole federal government, and none of the people who you didn't replace at the last minute told you that you won the election. And by the way, out of 7.1 million popular votes, how many of those votes you're saying aren't true? In other words, you got a pretty good whooping at the polls, and now you're trying to correct it. And so the lawyers in the indictment are not named, but they are deemed co-conspirators. And essentially, those are attorneys who are willing to spread, and they knew what they were saying was false, and they pursued a strategy that the December 2020 re-election attorney should not have pursued. And so you had these folks who was advising the President of the United States, 6 of them that they named in the indictment. And the news people identified these folks, starting with, of course, with Rudy Giuliani. And that was a really big clown show. And none of the stuff he said made any sense to me. And I thought that this person is probably unfit to be an attorney. And nevertheless, he still had his law license then, not now, because all they were doing was spreading lies. And so, having said that, and they're suffering the consequences of those lies every day. Now, how does this matter proceed? Well, the grand jury indicted the president, and despite the fact that all the Republicans in leadership on January 6th denounced his action. Some thought it was criminal, but almost to a person, they all said that was wrong and it was misconduct. But yet, the most famous thing, one of the most famous speeches that was given by the then leader of the Republican in the Senate, Mitch McConnell. And I remember his speech and how he phrased it. His justification for not delivering the additional 3 votes to have Trump removed from office, the reason he didn't get the 6th vote, Mitch McConnell said, basically he's got a couple weeks left and remove him from office now, it wouldn't make a whole lot of difference. But he still will be subjected to civil and criminal charges. So then Mitch McConnell told American people that I think he's guilty of sin, but I'm not going to vote to have him removed from office because he's got a few weeks left. January 6th, he's out of office, January the 21st. So you only got another week on a tenure. So remove him from office now don't mean a whole lot. But under our system of government, he can be held accountable through civil lawsuit and criminal lawsuits. So the Republican leader of the Senate, Mitch McConnell, that's what he articulated. And then a strange thing has happened. Now, the Republicans in the same positions, not Mitch McConnell, he hasn't spoken, but the Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, is now defending him and saying there's political witch hunt. And I'm trying to think, are you freaking kidding me? Do you not see those people storm the, weren't you scared for your freaking life? Weren't you running like a scared, you know what? In other words, they were scared to death of being killed by the mob. You got to remember, the mob wasn't just angry at the Democrats. They had an emphasis and they said, hang the vice president. So the vice president of the United States, the mob people were angry at him and they want to murder the vice president. The vice president, all he did was something very simple. He said, the Constitution doesn't allow me to decide who the president of the United States. That right is reserved to the American citizen. And that's basically was accurate. But the angry mob has goal set to kill the vice president of the United States, who's the second highest ranked Republicans in the country. And so that's how ridiculous this process was. And so as days go by, I see in our chat room, they talked about a 4th indictment in Georgia, Fannie Willis. I thought that the indictment in Georgia should have been done a long time ago, along with this indictment. And the reason being, evidence of the crime was obtained before he left office. They had the recording that the Secretary of State released to the public. So all this evidence, the faked electors, that was available in January 2021. So I was concerned as to why does it take 2.5 years to review evidence that you had copies of real time when it was occurring. And that's the only thing that I was concerned about. I'm thinking, what exactly was going on? So I'll be only surprised if he's not indicted in Georgia, because the same prosecutor indicted educators for not properly administering tests to the students. And she recommended harsh punishment for those educators. These are teachers and administrators in the Fulton County school system. And so I was concerned that this would be swept on the rug. But the one thing that's interesting about the Georgia case is that the then president would really turn on both the Secretary of State, who threatened him with possible criminal prosecution, and the governor. And so it'd be interesting to see whether or not these Republicans that he's turned on would then also come to rescue him. So we'll be watching that with great interest. But meanwhile, these trials are all lining up next year. Like every month, the way they're going, we're going to have a trial or a hearing involving the former president. Folks, this is untested water. Democracy is fragile. Democracy is what these rules are important, that no man is above the law. So democracy will be tested over the next year. We will determine whether or not, as is done for many centuries, whether or not we'll be able to maintain this democracy. But the one thing that we have to do as a citizen, more than ever, you have to stand up for democracy. That means that you have to go vote in the election, not do a 9% turnout. And the second thing is that if you get a subpoena to appear for jury duty, make sure you show up. Be a good citizen. You know. Now, finally, one of our callers talked about the police department and help police. So if you see a crime in our city, please help the police identify the assailant. Let's work together, folks, to get rid of this scar in our community. We do have too many homicides. It's too many people from our community shooting each other. I'm horrified each day that the gravity of this assault on our community, by our community. So, work with your kids, take those guns out of their hand. We have too many teenagers with guns now. Make sure that you take the guns out of their hand. By the way, we hold you civilly liable if your kids shoot someone. We sue you. I want you to know that, because we think that you have to keep the guns out of these teenagers' hand, and that you could be liable for their action if you're negligent in allowing them to get a gun. So keep that in mind. So join us next week, and thank you, callers, for calling in, and I look forward to speaking to you next Saturday. Until then, make sure you register to vote. Don't believe these false political ads by Jefferson Street, and may God bless and keep you once again. Thank you, and have a blessed day.